This might be one of the geekiest things I've ever done.
What's going on, guys? I'm Yeshaya, this is Fireface Films, and today we're talking about why your camera's color science doesn't matter. But before we do, make sure you drop a like, get subscribed, and click that bell to get notified when we post. Alright, on with the show. So, there's lots of chatter about this camera's color science is better or this camera's color science is better. Well, I'm here to dispel that with one hypothesis. That being, if you are using a camera agnostic color pipeline, then an individual camera's color science does not matter. So, let's go over some stuff and then we'll talk about the experiment that took place here. First, let's talk about what a camera agnostic color pipeline is. So, this kind of goes hand in hand with the concept of color management, which is the journey from what the camera saw to what your color working space is to what your display can show you. So essentially, if you're using a manufacturer transform LUT, which is reliant on a camera's color science, then you are just simply relying on, say, S-Log3 out to 709, and that's that color pipeline. Whereas if you're relying on a camera agnostic color pipeline, doing something more like S-Log3 through ACES or DaVinci Wide Gamut or even Arilog C3 out to Rec 709. What's the difference? Why does it matter? Well, essentially, if you were relying on a manufacturer transform to get out from log to display, you're relying on the manufacturer's color science and their preferential way of getting out to a display space and how you see that. Whereas if you're using a camera agnostic color pipeline, you are designating how you want the image to be formed and how you want it to look, i.e. having more control over your creative look. So, what is the point of all this? Essentially, if you were trying to match cameras or decide, hey, I think this camera's color is better than this camera's color, well, you can dispel that claim by essentially equalizing the field that the camera's color is on. Now, this conversation does not take into account the idea of a camera's dynamic range because that is heavily governed by a camera's sensor, whereas the color science can be easily manipulated and changed around a color pipeline. So, let's talk about what our color pipeline is for the terms of this experiment. So, we have four cameras. We have the Fujifilm X-T5, we have the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K, the Sony FX6, and the Nikon Z5 II. So these four cameras all have wildly different log profiles and color spaces. But through the color pipeline we're going to use today, what we should see is that all four of them look the same. So before we see that, we're going to look at all four of the cameras through their native transforms and see how they differ and what might be the same. And then we will look at the four cameras through one unified color pipeline. So let's talk about what our color pipeline is for the purposes of this experiment. What we are doing is we're converting from the native color space of the cameras out to DaVinci Wide Gamut, then all the way out to Rec 709 Gamma 2.2. And in there, we're going to have a film transform to have an equalizing look. So in this case, it's going to get a little technical here, if it hasn't been already, but we're using Kodak Vision 2 printed out to Fujifilm 3523 XD. All you need to know when I say that is we are doing a very stylized film look to unify these cameras. Okay, let's get to the comparison and experiment. Right now, I'm here looking at the footage on the computer, and let's set the scene of what we actually did here. So, we took the four cameras, when we were using the Sony FX6 as the baseline control, I exposed the scene at 400 ISO. But, here's the thing, with the four cameras involved, they all have different base ISOs, right? So the FX6 has a base ISO of 800, the Z5 II has a base ISO of 800, and then the Pocket 6K has a base ISO of 400, and the X-T5 has a base ISO of 1000. I use the FX6 as the control with the Cine EI monitoring feature to set the scene at 400 ISO. And what I would do then is exposure adjust all the cameras to 400 ISO using exposure adjustments within Resolve. So let's have a look at the footage here. So first, with the FX6 as the control, this is what we get with Sony's transform LUT. So basically, this is their control LUT, like this is their transform out to 709. So as you see here in Resolve, we have Sony S-Log3 Cine to Cine Plus 709, which is their form of 709. You have these other versions, but they're too low contrast, type A, which is unspecified, and all of these are unspecified 709, which is a problem because if you are using the manufacturer transform LUTs, you don't have any control of what gamma these transforms are. They're just 709 unspecified. Whereas, again, if you're using a color managed pipeline, you have control over that. This is, again, Sony for the control. This is Blackmagic with its transform out for the control. This is the Z5 II out with its manufacturer LED. And this is the X-T5 with the manufacturer LED. So what do you see? You would see all these are wildly different. And again, that is because we're using the manufacturer transform from all these various color spaces into Rec. 709. But let me set the scene for you now with a camera agnostic, i.e. color managed pipeline for all of these cameras. We have the FX6, the Pocket 6K, the Z5 II, and the X-T5. Now, here's the thing, right? When you look at all of these together, let's cycle through it again. FX6, Pocket 4K, Z5 II, and X-T5. Now, these are a lot closer to being the same. Now, how do we get there? First, let's use the FX6 as the example here. We'll go back to the manufacturer transform. So, as you see here, there's only one thing on the step here, which is the LUT that takes us from S-Log to 709, which, again, we have no control over what this is doing, which is not good. It's not what we want. Let's go to the Sony camera agnostic pipeline version, and now we have a transform in from Sony S-Log 3 into DaVinci Wide Gamut. And for the purposes of this experiment, I'm using Genesis, which is a fantastic look development tool which helps you design film-like looks by actually having film stocks and film prints. But we're not going to go over that specifically today. So for the purposes of this example here, we are using this as our transform out. And so again, we are going from S-Log 3 to DaVinci Wide Gamut, and then we're going from DaVinci Wide Gamut out to our preferred film pipeline out to Rec. 709 Gamma 2.2. And we've done this output transform on all of these clips. So essentially, we have neutralized the playing field for all four of these very different cameras to look a lot more similar. Now, I'm not going to say the same as you can see here, FX6, Blackmagic Pocket 6K, Z5 II, X-T5. There are minute differences, which I can go through with a scalpel and surgically iron out those differences so that these all look the same. But for the purposes of this experiment, that's a little out of scope. But I just want to say that with this kind of pipeline in mind, we can get a lot closer to these images all being on a level playing field. Now, I can't imagine a situation where very often you're shooting 4 different cameras and trying to match all at once. But if you do get in a situation, this is the kind of thing you want to have in mind when you are actually going to have to match them in post. Now, say you don't have Genesis. Say all you have is Resolve as your baseline and you want to still be able to match cameras. Well, again, the same principle applies. So let's say we're not using Genesis. Okay, so now we're using the free DRT JP2499 to get from DaVinci Wide Gamut out to a display. So let's look at it again. So now we're using this transform out on these images. So here's the FX6, here's the Pocket 6K, here's the Z5 II, and here's the X-T5. Since we are using a color managed pipeline, these images all look very similar and ready to go. Now, granted, there are still some minor differences, but these are a lot easier to manage than trying to work with the manufacturer transforms. So let's run through them all from the top. So, manufacturer FX6, manufacturer Pocket 6K, manufacturer Z5 II, and manufacturer X-T5, color managed FX6, color managed Pocket 6K, color managed Z5 II, and color managed X-T5. Now let's reset the board to what we actually set the scene to, which is the film look that we built. We're now back to the images that we actually set and metered for, and as you can see, there is a massive difference due to the creative choices that we have made here. And this is one of the key reasons why I believe that your camera color science does not matter, because if you're working in a pipeline that allows you to have maximum creative control, you will not rely on those camera color sciences. You're going to rely on something that you can control every step of the way through, whether that be you yourself as a DP colorist, or you as someone working with a colorist who can help you make these decisions. Okay, so let's sum it up. we saw 4 cameras, each transformed via the manufacturer LUT, a CST through Genesis, and a CST through the free DRT JP2499. And what's the ultimate conclusion? Well, first, you can obviously get more preferable results by taking control of your color pipeline. Second, trying to mix cameras with only the manufacturer LUTs would be a ridiculously insurmountable challenge, as we saw, since they provide much different starting points and no semblance of actually matching off the rip. Hey guys, it's me a few months later with a bit of an amended conclusion. First off, here are all the images that we've gone over with a much more close alignment, with a bit of a contrast tweak and some more precise white balance adjustments using linear gain. And after some further thought, I've come to the conclusion that this hypothesis is supported by the experiment, but there's a bit more nuance to it. Now, in reality, when we are comparing camera color science using manufacturer LUTs, what we're really comparing is a given camera company's preferential output transform, as we've kind of talked about in this video. And what we've seen now is that when these different images are aligned under the same transform, whatever differences there are become significantly easier to iron out, leading to much better matching and uniformity. Now, when we're talking about comparing the camera color science, again, it's a bit farcical to be using these manufacturer LUTs to compare that, as you're not only kind of muddying the water by using the preferential transform from the manufacturer, you're also not getting the cleanest, I guess, representation of the camera color science, if that makes sense. Because what you really want to see is how is it going to react to your pipeline, which is why this hypothesis goes over the camera agnostic color pipeline. Because once we throw these cameras into a unified environment, we can see how they react. And what we've found and what we have seen is that once these cameras are in a camera agnostic color pipeline, their differences are significantly less apparent, which is very preferable. Also, massive shout out and thanks to my fellow colorist, Thatcher Freeman. He helped out a lot with this project and gave me really good advice on how to bring this thing home. And he makes awesome DCTLs. I will leave a link to his GitHub. If you are a colorist or you want to kind of dip your toe into being a colorist, definitely check out his DCTLs and they will help you a lot in your color grading practice. Okay guys, that's gonna be doing it for today. If you enjoyed what you saw, make sure you drop a like and comment below and let me know. If there's anything you feel like you learned today, please tell me about it. And if there's anything you feel like you missed, please tell me about it, because I want to learn and I want to get better and give you guys better information. But yeah guys, until next time, I'm Yeshaya, this is Fireface Films, and we'll see you in the next one.